Hey, what's up guys, my name is Eterno and today we're going to be starting a new mini-series on serialization. So this is kind of, the idea for this came from the game programming series because this is actually going to be required for the game programming series. So everyone who's following along with that series, I do encourage that you watch this, but this is also going to be applicable to everything, which is why I'm kind of making this as like a standalone series because what I'm going to do and what I'm going to teach you in this series will be applicable to pretty much anything, right? And in fact, it's even going to be applicable to Sparky to some extent, because the Sparky engine is going to be using a similar system as to what I'm going to basically implement here. But anyway, all that aside, it should be fun, and we're going to be learning all about serialization, which is always a great topic. So first of all, what is serialization? Because I'm sure that a lot of you have heard it being mentioned from time to time, and you've heard it before and you've kind of maybe gotten a bit scared of it and you've kind of just heard it in passing and you've been like, I don't know what that is and I don't really care. So what is serialization? So serialization is actually very simple. It's actually very broad as well. All it really means is it's basically the process of converting an object into a stream of bytes. Okay, so by object I don't mean literally like a Java object or something like that. It can really mean anything. So, which is why the definition, as I mentioned, is extremely broad, right? All it means is that you've got all this information, essentially. So, for example, a good example would be like an entity, right? An entity in your game might have something like, in fact, I'm just going to draw stuff for you guys here. An entity in your game might have properties such as a name, you know, the position, I don't know, information about the inventory that they contain, anything like that, right? Excuse the handwriting, by the way, just gonna have to deal with it. It's hard to write on this very old and inferior tablet. But anyway, you might have all this kind of data here, and this is like information that is it's relevant to you in the game, right? Once it's in memory in your application, in your game, you're constantly using it. It's constantly important to the way that the game kind of functions, and it's something that you kind of need, right? But serialization is essentially the process of taking all that and converting it into basically a byte array for all intents and purposes. Converting it into a stream of bytes, okay? And you might be like, why am I going to be converting this information into a stream of bytes? You know, what use does that have? And it has a lot of uses, okay? The two primary uses we're going to be looking at for this series is going to be to write it out into a file, okay? And also to essentially write it out into the network, okay? So those are the two situations we're going to be dealing with, okay? So by file, the best example of this is like a save game, right? You want to basically save out the state of your game into a file so that you can then close the game, and then at a later time the player can open the game and essentially deserialize that file and get all of that state back into memory so that they can continue where they left off. Okay, that's the usage of a file. That's the best way to describe it, okay? Another very, very common thing, so like save games again are one example, but you've also got stuff like essentially assets for the game, okay? So like, for example, a lot of games have essentially like a level editor, and you might use it, you might create a tool for your engine that actually helps you design the levels and whatnot, and then mostly you would basically convert all that data that you make in that level editor into like a format, a certain file, right? And then at runtime, when the game starts, it loads that level, and you know, it needs a way to do that, and that's where serialization comes in as well, because that's another example of files, right? So assets, really, and really any custom format that you might have, like a custom model format or a custom texture format, really anything, right? Will basically need some form of serialization, because obviously that will be stored on disk as a binary file, for example. This is concerning binary files, we'll get into that later as well, and it needs a way to basically interpret that and convert that into memory as required, okay? So that's the idea of the file. The network is a bit different. Essentially what I mean with that is stuff like multiplayer, and essentially stuff like packets. Okay, so we want to be able to send packets of data over the network, and packets are just like a bunch of bytes that you want to send over the network. So the game programming series, of course, is beginning its multiplayer journey right now. So if you missed the first kind of introduction to multiplayer video, I would encourage you to go and watch that if you're interested in that series. But basically, we are starting multiplayer in game programming, and because of that, we need a way to send data from computer to computer. Okay. And that's where serialization comes in, because we need to be able to basically format all of our data into a format that we can just send over the network. And obviously it needs to be efficient and fast, as well as, you know, easy to use and whatnot, and we need a special format for that. So we'll get into like the network side of things a bit more as we go on with this series. And I will probably touch a bit on it, but just for now, we're going to be focusing on the file aspect of serialization, just because it's a lot easier to test. It doesn't require anything pretty much. Writing out our resulting byte array into a file, for example, and being able to read and write that is actually much easier than having to set up a bunch of network protocols to deal with, as not to mention 2 computers potentially, or 2 instances of an application to be able to send and receive data. So we're going to be focusing on the file thing, but the format that I'm going to design here is going to be the same. So the same stuff that we send over the network will be written to a file as well, and whatnot. So they will be interchangeable, and they will be identical for this series. Okay. So anyway, that is the idea. So transmission of data both to a file and over the network is essentially the concept of serialization. Okay. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you can leave a comment below and I'll try and reply to a lot of these. But I think that explains it pretty well. Okay, so let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about the format and how it's going to work. And I'm also going to touch a bit on definitions of certain words I mentioned probably. And this is going to serve as like an introductory video, but also like a planning kind of video of what this is going to look like. And then next time we'll kind of continue on to probably learning how we can actually do stuff like the conversion of this stuff into bytes and back. And we'll kind of just go on from there. So first of all, I have to mention that I'm going to be writing the actual code for this serialization library that we're going to be making here in Java. Now, the reason I'm doing it in Java, and a lot of you might be surprised and or angry, but the reason I'm doing it in Java, and the only reason I'm doing it in Java, is because of the game programming series. Because this is basically I'm going to design this in such a way that the game programming series can simply kind of load that library that we make here and use it, and that's it. So I'm not going to be doing what I did with the events system, where I'm going to basically copy and paste everything into the code. No, I'm actually going to be designing it as a pure library. Okay, so that comes to my second question, or your second question. Is Java a good thing to use for this? Is it going to be easy in Java? The answer is no. This is actually going to be quite difficult to do in Java, because Java has very few features, let's just say, when it comes to stuff like direct memory access, which is a problem, because serialization, as you can probably tell, is all about bytes and all about memory access and all about getting stuff from and to memory. Okay. Because Java has problems with that, as well as there are a lot of things that I noticed while writing this serialization format in Java that are just going to be kind of annoying to write. Okay, and I'll kind of point them out when they come up. But the point is that Java is not a great language for this kind of stuff, because admittedly this is quite low level, and this is kind of the stuff that a language like C++ would absolutely excel at. Not to mention it would be very much more efficient. And this serialization format that I'm actually going to write here is actually a port of the Sparky serialization format, which isn't actually integrated into Sparky yet, but it's more or less a standalone library that I've just written in my spare time. And it's not on GitHub or anything yet, but this is almost like a backport from that C++ stuff. So yes, I had to change a lot of things because of the way Java's written, but but it has to be done because of the game programming series, and I'm not going to, like, I don't know, a lot of you guys might be like, you could still just write it in C++ and then pass it into Java via JNI or something, and that's not going to happen, because that's going to require a lot of extra work just because of many things. Okay, so anyway, that's the idea. This is going to be written in Java, So I might do a C++ version of this later if you guys are interested, because I'm going to have to do it anyway for Sparky. But for now we're using Java, and that's just that's the end of that. Okay, cool. So let's talk about a few terms here. So binary, okay? Binary and text. These are two ways that you can store files, essentially. Actually, that's probably about it. I can't think of any other ways you can store files. You can store files as binary data, or you can store files as text. So text might be something like a XML file, okay? So in fact, I happen to have one open here right now. So this is like an example of, this is actually just something I've got open in Sublime Text, not even relevant. Point is, XML. This is an XML, for example. This is actually, in case you guys are interested for some reason, this is part of the Sparky CLI generator. But essentially, this is what you would call a text file format, because it is, as you can see, written in plain text, and there's really nothing here that is essentially binary, right? It's a bunch of characters. Okay, it's plain text. The advantages of these kind of formats are very simple. They are readable by humans very easily and modifiable by humans really easily. If I wanted to change this, or I wanted to add, let's just say I wanted to add another type for, what am I missing here? I wanted to add another type for like short or something, and I wanted to do something like that. You can see I can quickly do that stuff, and there's no problem whatsoever, okay? So that's kind of the way that works. It's pretty simple. Text file formats are always good for stuff like property files, or things that you want people to be able to edit, but you don't necessarily want them to be in the GUI. So stuff like configuration files are generally a good way to go. And obviously these have their advantages and disadvantages. The quick advantages of this, as I just mentioned, were human readability and writability, I guess. But the disadvantages are the fact that it's just going to be less efficient and slower, because if you want to basically load and process this in your application, it means that you have to basically do a lot of string parsing, which means that you have to do stuff like splitting strings and like looking for certain keywords, and it's a bit of a mess, and it's very inefficient compared to something like binary, which we're about to talk about in a minute. So what does a binary file look like? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I don't actually have any open right now. Let's see if I can find something. You know what, let's just open this MP4 file. That's binary. So this is what binary files look like. They look like binary, okay? So this is obviously hexadecimal, but it's just a representation of the actual binary data that is in this file, because it's much easier to read hex than binary. It's much less verbose to read hex than binary, because obviously we fit bytes into less characters. But essentially, every 2 digits is a byte, okay? Because that's the way that it works, because 1 digit can store anywhere between 0 and 15, and then, sorry, yes, 0 and 15, and then that, obviously, 2 of them, so that's 4 bits, and this is 4 bits, and you get a byte being 2 hexadecimal characters. So that being said, this is, yeah, again, it's a binary file, you have no idea what it says, you have no idea how it works, it's just a bunch of numbers for all you care, right? But the point is that this is obviously much quicker for the computer to read for a few reasons, okay? And it's really just up to you and up to how the binary format is structured. Because what happens is that when you read this, instead of reading in strings and then having to essentially convert those things you read into strings and then having to do multiple string operations to extract the data you want, the data is really just available for you straight away, okay? So you might be like, I know that, for example, so this is a video file, it's an MP4 file. You might know that, for example, in this MP4 file format, which I don't know how that works right now, so I'm not going to, none of what I'm going to say is true, but let's just say that you know that the, I don't know, like the 16th byte or whatever, has a certain thing. Let's just say that line 6, for example, this is the start of the name of the MP4 file, for example. You might be like, okay, so the length of the thing, or whatever, is 7 bytes long, and then like this is it, right? This is like the name of the thing. So what happens is if you want to know what the name of the MP4 file is, for example, you'll be like, oh, I know exactly what to read. I just need to know the offset, which I do because I know how the format works, and then I just load this into memory, and that's it. I'm done. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say, I know that this is probably sounding pretty complicated, but what I'm trying to say is that for most cases, yes, what you want to actually load into your memory and what you see here is pretty much the same. So if I want to load this data into memory, all I have to do is read it, okay, and that's it. I don't have to do any kind of string passing. All I say is that I'm going to basically allocate a new array, I'm going to read in these bytes, and that's it. It is in my memory now, okay? And of course, you don't even have to bring it into memory. You can do other things like memory mapping, which is way out of scope here. But that's the basic idea, okay? So I don't want to complicate you guys too much, but that's the way that it works, all right? So we're going to be obviously creating a binary format because there's no reason to create a text format. It's going to be sent, remember the primary purpose of this is the multiplayer thing. So we're going to be sending it to and from computers, and there's no reason for us to use text for that, because if we do use text for that, it means that we have to format our string with our data in a special way on like computer 1, for example, and then computer 2 has to receive a stream of bytes, obviously, because you can't send text over network. This will have to receive that stream of bytes, convert it to a text, and then pass the text to get the data out. It's just very, very weird. I hope you guys know what I mean, by the way. I might make another video covering the details of this. I'm kind of trying to rush through this, but that's the idea. So, that being said, already at like 15 minutes. So that being said, binary is going to be the way to go, all right? So the format, when we come to binary, okay, we need to have some kind of format. So usually, format-wise, which we'll actually talk about next time because we're way out of time. This was more or less an introduction video, and I keep drawing random things here. We need to design some kind of format. This is our goal right now. We need to design a format which contains all of the data we need in a way that can be read quickly and also in a way that can be somewhat easy to implement. Okay, so we might want to do, for example, when we have our entity, yeah, we need to obviously be like, hey, I want to write out the name of the entity, the X and Y of the entity, and the inventory contents or whatever of the entity into this file. But then remember, writing it into a file is easy. You might just be like, take the bytes of name, write it, take the bytes of X and Y, write it, and then you're done, right? But the problem is, how do you read that back? How do you deserialize it? So how do you say that, okay, I've opened up a file and now I want to set name and X and Y equal to the actual data that I wrote out into that file, right? How do you retrieve that? In order to retrieve this stuff from that file that you serialized, you need to know information about it, such as what you're trying to get. So you might be like, let's open up the entity section of the file. Let's retrieve the name. So maybe you'll have a key called name, and it will actually contain the string that is the name, so that you can set that equal to that, right? Same with XY. You might look and you might be like, okay, look for an entity object in our serialization format, and then extract its X and Y, which might be like floats or something, or integers, right? We need a way to be able to do that. We need a way to be able to create files that are both easy to save and quick to kind of save out data, as well as not taking up too much space, right? Because space matters, especially for network transmission, because the more bytes we have, the longer it's going to take to send that stuff. And then we also need to be able to efficiently be like, hey, I want to read a certain property, a certain value inside that serialization format and retrieve it back into my entity object. Okay, so that is going to require quite an efficient format, quite a cleverly designed format that is going to be able to do this in a good way. Okay, so we're going to be talking all about that next time. I'm going to outline the format next time, and we're going to get this party started. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Also, if you want to support me making videos such as this one, the best way to do that is to head on over onto patreon.com/thecherno. There is a link in the description, but here is a webpage. And then you can become a patron by giving a certain amount per month. And of course, you do get rewarded for that. So if you pledge $5 or more per month, you get access to the entire source code of game programming via GitHub. The source code to this is actually going to be released for free on GitHub, so don't worry about that. But it's just a good way to support me and ensure that I have more time to make videos such as these. Also, I did make a Slack channel. For those of you who are not aware still, it's Slack. If you go to slack.thecherno.com, you will be greeted with a join the Cherno kind of thing, right? Basically, what a Slack channel is it's just like a chat kind of community situation. So it's like a community that you can join, and it's essentially called a team, right? But basically, it just means that you can join like a channel, like a chat channel, and there's just a bunch of people talking about stuff over there. In fact, I might show you guys right now. Whoops. I'm not sure if I've even got the desktop app installed. But once you register for that, you can actually head over to thecherno.slack.com, which I can definitely show you guys. I have to log in and everything. Okay, you're gonna have to trust me on this. Just follow the link in the description, and basically that will enable all of you guys to talk to each other in real time. Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.